How do we go from this to this? If you're looking to add some lush, dreamy tones to your MC101 music, then you've come to the right place. Since the last update, when the partials option was added to the menu, we've had access to the incredible synth engine inside the MC101, and all of a sudden this tiny box has got the potential to be a really useful sound design tool. And because it's so small, you can use it to design sounds in bed, on the sofa, by a campfire, on the way to Mars, anywhere you like. Anyway, enough of that. You want to know how to program big pad sounds. First of all, a bit of a warning. There's a lot of menu diving, and I know some people are put off by that. Because this is quite a complex synth engine, I quite like the menu diving. It helps you structure what you're doing in a much more methodical way. I'm going to start by giving a brief overview of the structure of an MC101 patch. Basically, you have 4 components called partials, and they're all the same, and you can layer them up. Each partial has an oscillator, envelopes for amplitude, filter and pitch, and 2 LFOs, and there's a routing matrix that you can use to control various parameters. The partials can all be turned off independently, so you can have as few as 1 partial in a patch or 4, and they can all be edited independently. So if you wanted, you could edit the LFO on partials 1 and 2 separately to partials 3 and 4. But by default, all of the partials are edited at the same time. To edit the partials separately, you need to press Shift on one of the buttons below the C1, C2, C3 and C4, and they turn the editing capacity for those partials on and off. So if you wanted to edit partials 1 and 2, you would press Shift and the C1 and the C2, make sure they were lit and none of the other buttons were lit. So I'm going to create a new clip and make a big pad sound. When you start a new clip and you press Note to go into the sound editing kind of area, you get the init tone, which is a simple 1 oscillator triangle wave, I believe. So in order to get to the partials menu to edit this, you press Shift and the button underneath the C1 called Sound. And when you press that, you get into a new menu which you can navigate using the value knob. So turn the value knob until it reads partial, press it in, and there you are, you're ready to edit the sound. We're going to skip past pages 1 and 2. You don't need to know about those, and go right to page 3. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of an idea of what you can see on the screen. So you have on the top row a little guide to where you are. So it will say page 3, oscillator 1, and then in brackets 1/2. So that's telling you that you're on page 3, you're working on oscillator 1, and it's the first of 2 lines of parameters. One of the reasons why I ended up getting an MC101 over a Digitact was so that I could access the years and years of sampling and sound creation that Roland have embarked upon. All of their string sounds and piano sounds and vocal samples, all laid out nicely on a keyboard, saving me a lot of work. Now, I know you can get samples from the internet, but with this, it's a hell of a lot easier, and it's all there ready to access and use. So I'm going to turn the C1 dial, skipping past all of the different oscillator options, the virtual analogues and the vintage oscillators, until I get to the PCM. Now, you can see when I turn that C1 dial that different sets of options come up on the C1 to C4 buttons. And when we get down to the PCM, you have group, bank and wave. Now, for the moment, we can ignore the group and bank, and we're going to look straight to the wave. Here, we're going to look for a lovely, I think, vocal sound as we're creating a pad. So, use the C4 dial to scoot round until you get into approximately the right place. And then to fine tune, going individual steps, you press the button down below the C4 and use the value dial to turn it, and that will go one step at a time until you get the value that you want. That's a good start, but I'm going to now start layering. So I'm going to skip forward past page 4 and page 5 onto page 6, because at the moment we can only hear one oscillator and we need to be able to hear at least 2 if we're going to layer. When you get onto page 6, you can see from the top that you're on oscillator 2 and you're on page 2 out of 2, and the first option is labelled SW, and that, I assume, stands for switch. So if you turn the C1 dial, that will turn that oscillator to on, and then you'll be able to hear it. Now we're going to turn the value dial so that we scoot back to page 5 and then go through the same thing, C1 down to PCM, and then scoot through the waves until we find something that we like. And here we're going to start to make it a bit more interesting. Back to page 6, we're going to go to the second option along, which is under the C2 dial, and that is the coarse tuning. So if you play the note and you turn the C2 dial, you can hear the second oscillator change pitch until you make a nice sounding chord. Right, let's make things that little bit more interesting by introducing some movement to this sound. We're going to scoot right the way to the LFOs. Just to bring you up to speed and to point out how complicated and confusing this can be. Each of the oscillators for the partials have their own page, but when you get to the LFOs and the envelopes, you have one page which is shared between all of the different partials, and this is where you have to use the partial editing buttons. So I'm going to make sure that partials 1 and 2 are lit up by pressing the shift and the 1 and 2 button, and that partial editing for 3 and 4 is off. So make sure that 3 and 4 are not lit up at all, and that way I know I'm only editing the LFO for partials 1 and 2. I'm going to edit the amplitude of partial 1, so it makes a kind of a siren on-off noise. In order to do this, I need to get just the C1 button lit. So I press shift and the C2, and there we are. C1 button is lit on its own. Now I go to the amplitude parameter and I tweak that, and you can hear it only affecting the partial 1. The reason I chose a square wave is so that it emphasises the changes and I can really hear what's going on. What I'm going to do now is go and edit partial 2, and this is quite easy. I just press the shift button, the C1 and the C2, and you can see that the partial 1 light goes off and the partial 2 light comes on. Now I'm going to turn the amplitude and tweak it in the opposite direction so that I get a siren effect. Now this is cool and it's a good sound, but it's not quite what I want. I want things to be a bit more floaty and move a little bit more gently and smoothly. So I want to change that LFO for both partials 1 and 2. So shift again and I press the C1 button so that the lights for both partial 1 and partial 2 are lit up beneath the C1 and C2. And now when I change the wave shape to a sine so that everything is smooth, both of the partials change to that wave shape at the same time. My next job is to do something almost identical with partials 3 and 4. But because I want to hear exactly what's going on with those, I'm going to go right back to the first few pages and use the switches to turn off oscillators 1 and 2 so that I can only hear partials 3 and 4 while I'm editing them. Now that the bass sound is constructed in lots of lovely layers, making a kind of chord, and it's got some movement going on with the LFOs, what I really need to do is shape it to create the proper pad sound. So slowly evolving and slow decay. And I want all of the partials to have that same slow attack and slow release. So I'm going to press the shift button and make sure that all 4 partial lights are alight. Now, when I edit the amplitude envelope, all of the partials will change together. So, scroll through to the amplitude envelope, turn up the time for the attack, turn up the time for the release, and there we have it, a nice wafting pad sound. Builds up gently and then fades out like that wafty, floaty pad sound that we love. Finally, to put everything together, I'm going to add some multi-effects on here. And all of the different separate component partials which are layered will be pulled together. I press the exit button to get out of the partials mode and then use the value dial to scoot up to the multi-effects editor and click the button so that we go in. Make sure it's switched on and then dial up till you get to type, and instead of the default through, just scroll through until you find a multi-effects that you like. I'm going to select for this one the EP delay effects. Just tweak a few parameters, pull everything together, blissful floatness, and there we are. Lush, creamy, wafty, floaty pads. Bliss. Hope some of you found this useful. If you've got any questions, ask. I love it. If you want me to go over anything, feel free to ask. Like, subscribe, and most of all, In the words of the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation, share and enjoy.